Today, we will continue with our discussion with Dr. Syed Hassaan Bokhari, a physician, a historian, consultant with Character Education Foundation CEF, head of India desk at South Asia Times, Islamabad. Dr. Hassaan also runs his YouTube channel, History with Hassaan, and you will find the link to his channel in the description of our video. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Dr. Hassaan. Welcome back to the channel.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you.
So how are you doing? How's us? We haven't been talking for the last 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, can't complain. I'm very happy. Allah ka fazal hai.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, so Dr. Hassaan, we want to continue with our discussion from where you left off the last time. So I was reviewing our discussions and there were 3 specific words that you used. You actually said that the idea of Pakistan was to create a modern Islamic state in the last episode. I think that you agree that this goal has not been fully achieved so far in Pakistan. In today's discussion, we will talk about what went wrong in the first 25 years and how it can be fixed. Before I do that, many say that Muhammad Ali Jinnah, rahmatullah alayhi, the founder of Pakistan, only lived for a year after the creation of Pakistan, while Nehru remained the Prime Minister of India for the first 16 years. How much of an impact do you think the death of Muhammad Ali Jinnah and then his protege, Liaquat Ali Khan, who was assassinated, had on the growth and genesis of the state of Pakistan, that they passed away very early after the founding of Pakistan? What was the impact of that?
Okay. You see, the basic thing is to examine the structure. When we compare that Nehru governed for 16 years and Muhammad Ali Jinnah died within a year and Liaquat Ali Khan died after 4 years of the birth of Pakistan. But if we compare the structures of Pakistan and Indian movements of independence, specifically the parties that led those independence movements, that is the Muslim League for Pakistan and the Indian National Congress for India. So we observed that the Indian National Congress was a much more organized body with a very organized leadership cadre compared to the Muslim League, of course. They had their faults, they had their weaknesses, a lot of them. But if we compare them to the Muslim League, for instance, Gandhi did die within 6 months of India's independence. And Gandhi's death had the potential to light a fire inside India between those who were proponents of Hindutva and those who weren't, especially among the Hindu majority, because Gandhi's killer, he wasn't a Muslim or a British, he was a Hindu, but
right-wing Hindu.
Even Gandhi's death didn't cause a lot of long-term political turmoil in India. And similarly, if we assume that had Nehru died with Muhammad Ali Jinnah in September or October of 1948, even then India had a cadre of leadership capable of leading India, and some of them probably would have led India even better than Nehru did. For instance, many Indians today, especially those who have a soft spot for Hindutva, actually said that Sardar Patel would have made a better prime minister, or some of those from the south, they would say that Rajgopalachari would have made a better prime minister of India. But for Pakistan, it was a dearth of leadership from the start. It was Kahtur Rijal, a term we use. Muhammad Ali Jinnah was, to be honest, the soul of the Muslim League. And without him, the Muslim League was essentially rudderless. It was more or less a one-man show. It was Muhammad Ali Jinnah who united these disparate politicians. It was Muhammad Ali Jinnah who did all the political, let's say, maneuvering that led the Unionists in the Punjab and the old politicians of Bengal to join the Muslim League, because the Muslim masses had been galvanized, but the leadership, that wasn't. And the leadership, most of them only wanted to look out for themselves. So it was only Muhammad Ali Jinnah who had the political capital to change the trajectory which Pakistan could take. If Muhammad Ali Jinnah would say that this is going to be the constitution, then that would have been the constitution. Such was the following he had. But the problem with such sort of thing is, when a single person is running the show, is that if that single person is removed, then the rest of the people, they weren't up to scratch, actually. So, for instance, let me quote you an example. Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah went to Bengal, and there was a movement for language springing up there at that time in 1948 March. So he said that in front of a crowd of more than 100,000 Bengalis, and he said that language of Pakistan is going to be Urdu. And the crowd raised slogans, Quaid-e-Azam Zindabad, Pakistan Zindabad. Such was the pull of the man. But when a similar statement was made by Khwaja Nazmuddin 3 or 4 years later, all hell broke loose, and people came on the streets, and they fought with the police, and 5 or 6 protesters were killed. And ultimately, the agitation took such a vicious turn that the government had to concede the demand to equally include Bengali as well as Urdu as the national language of Pakistan in the new constitution.
Let me interrupt you there and ask you a question. So this isn't part of this, but just a question came in my head. So, for the last 40 years, in Pakistan, we have this mentality of a one-man savior, one-man hero, right? Sometimes it's Ziaul Haq, sometimes it's Benazir, sometimes it's Nawaz Sharif, sometimes it's Musharraf, sometimes it's Imran Khan. So do you think that mentality that set into the nation was because of Muhammad Ali Jinnah? Because we also considered him a one-man hero, right? Who did everything.
I wouldn't blame Jinnah for it.
No, not blaming, but the mentality set comes from there.
Yeah,
the thinking,
you see the mentality actually where it comes from. You have to dig deeper to see. The cause of the one-man show is that we weren't able to organize anything. The organization. This is not done at the last moment.
Right.
When the water is up to this level, then you don't have time to organize.
Yeah.
Then you just have to use the emotional energies, and you just have to fight as a last resort. And sometimes you get saved and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
But the problem was that, as I said, the Indian National Congress had been doing organizational work in India since the early 1900s.
Yes.
But the Muslim League, it was never even able to do anything at this level before 1940. And when even after 1940, the Muslim League's organizational activities were essentially those that were given, or that were, let's say, the phrase I'm looking for is they were actually given on a contract actually to other people who didn't share the ideology of Iqbal or Quaid-e-Azam, but they had their political benefit with the Muslim League at that time. So they loaned their organizational muscle to the Muslim League for the time being. For their own interests. So when we talk about even Imran Khan, the same thing comes to mind. Imran Khan might have noble motives, but the fact is that he actually relied on a lot of these so-called electables in order to come to power. Now, Imran Khan had a different stage than Quaid-e-Azam. Quaid-e-Azam was facing a life and death situation in India. The Muslims did need a country, after all.
Yes.
In 2018, it wasn't that acute a situation, but in 1940, if anyone, and Iqbal did say to Jinnah in 1937 that these guys, these Sikandar Hayat types, which you are including in the Muslim League, these guys aren't sincere, they have their own motives, and they will just malign our movement. And Quaid-e-Azam actually, his reply isn't saved. Unfortunately, those letters were lost, but the argument went that if we don't unite the Muslims, however it may come, then come partition or come when the British leave, and the British were going to leave within some years, then what will we do? So we need a state, and then we can organize afterwards.
Okay.
But Jinnah was an old man, and he didn't live a long time to guide the state. And unfortunately, the mantle of the state leadership was then hijacked by these unionist types. And they have been, now if we talk about the impact of that, they have been ruling Pakistan practically for the 75 years. Okay. You see, people say in Pakistan, army is everything or this or that. But the bigger constant, even bigger constant than the army in Pakistan power politics is these electables. They have never gone anywhere.
Yeah. So let's now turn our attention to that. So let's turn our attention to the mistakes which were made and systematically address them. So let's talk about the first 10 years of Pakistan from 1947 to 1957. So in your view, what were the critical errors made? What was the impact? And can they be reversed today? Is it even possible? First 10 years we want to discuss.
First 10 years, that is basically from 1947 to 1957.
Correct.
This was the time period when this is basically the time period before the first military takeover. So I'm going to start off with the political mistakes, mistakes made in the political sphere. When Pakistan was made, it was with the promise of an Islamic welfare state, an Islamic vanguard state. But the leaders who were chosen to lead this vanguard state were those colonialist, most of those were colonialist stooges of the British. Now, this mistake continues today. The Pakistani nation galvanized itself for the struggle for Pakistan. They did vote for Pakistan. They migrated to Pakistan. There was huge fervor among the educated classes, the middle classes, the students. But as soon as the country was achieved, everybody just started worrying about their own piece of the pie. And most of the people who were sincere with the Pakistan ideology actually didn't participate in politics after 1947-48, and some of those who did were actually muscled out by these people, the unionist kinds. I would use this word for these people. I could use the word stooge as well, but I think that's a bit more impolite. But you know where I'm getting at with this word. So this mistake, this elite capture that we talk about today in Pakistan's political landscape, in Pakistan's economy, that elite capture actually started with the birth of Pakistan.
So it was set in motion back in 1947, right after.
Yeah, it was set in motion back in 1947, you know, and that is something that I would say, if I were to make a criticism of Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah, I would say that he had at least 13 months. And in those 13 months, he was the man who, whatever he would have said, would have been followed. And what he did not realize, well, I have the benefit of hindsight, of course. But what he didn't realize was that this poisonous tree planted by the British in the soil of Muslim India would always bear poisonous fruit. Because those people now, all their lifestyle, their legitimacy, their hopes, their aspirations, they were in awe of the British. They wanted to imitate the British. Even today, we see that the high point of Pakistani elite is to live their life like a middle-class person in the United States of America.
Yeah, speak English, dress like the West, act like the West.
And not even like the Western elite. No.
No.
They are just, Iqbal used the term khakbaz, those who only can roll in the mud. So these people are only able to roll in the mud. And these people, they were slaves before and they're slaves now. But the problem is that in an independent country cannot be run by slaves. If you do not have independent people at the helm, then you, at least what you do is you remove the slaves, you make the field open, and that will give a chance to the independent-minded people to step up. And that was never done. And that was a fatal mistake. And Pakistan was held captive from the start, both in East Pakistan and in West Pakistan. And and then there was the second fault line between East and West Pakistan, that the traditional elite inherited from the British took power in both West and East Pakistan. But the West Pakistani elite was more entrenched with the British because Punjab was more of interest to the British during the Raj compared with the poor East Bengal that came to Pakistan. So as a result, that British inherited West Pakistani elite was more powerful than the East Pakistani elite. And the East Pakistani elite developed the resentment against West Pakistan on the basis of that. And the East Pakistani, the politicians, they used a lot of, they acquired a lot of political capital by spreading hate against the West Pakistan. They didn't say the West Pakistan elite. They just said West Pakistan because these distinctions, to be honest, these distinctions, even if emphasized to the common people, are missed. And it's actually to paint a whole region as a villain is easier than to go into nuances and talk about in public meetings, talk about, okay, this elite is bad, the people are good. No, what they did was they say West Pakistan is bad, it's looting us, when actually it was an elite versus elite competition. A competition that ended in 1971 with that elite taking their portion of the pie, this elite taking this portion of the pie, and still both Pakistan and Bangladesh suffer from this same disease. You see the Sharifs in Pakistan, you see the Hasina Wajid and Mujib family in
Khaldas, yeah.
Bangladesh.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fantastic. So, okay. So the most critical error, in your opinion, is the elite capture that was set in motion after 1947, and it continues to grow and it's still there today.
And
Fantastic.
I would add another important reason. I will again quote Iqbal here.
Yeah.
Iqbal, a verse of him speaks very much to me when I think about these things, the mistakes that were made. Iqbal actually had a verse that said that फूंक डाले ये जमीनो आसमाने मुस्तार और खाकिस्तर से आप अपना जहां पैदा करें. So Iqbal's prescription was that the thing which you have taken by begging, by taking a loan from someone, just burn it and build a new one from the ashes. So what we did was that we took the loaned stuff from the British, the dole, the colonial dole that was given to us in return for 200 years of slavery, and we took it and we preserved it. And we preserved those same systems, the same colonial system in the army, in the bureaucracy, in the politics, when actually, and in the economy as well, when actually what we should have done is that we should have removed it all and then bravely embarked on a new adventure. We were, after all, the Pakistan was created as as it was said, as a laboratory for the Islamic ideology in the modern world. So let the ideology run like the communists did, and they suffered a lot, but at least they did something out of it. They did make something out of it. So now you can say Soviet Russia failed, but Vietnam and China haven't. So that was a main mistake, and that mistake spans the boundary of political, military, and economic. That mistake was made in all the spheres, political, military, and economic, and it continues today. And we are in a spiral going down, 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 down into the same black hole that we escaped with difficulty in 1947.
So, so the question comes, and again, I'm deviating from my topic, right? So the systems that Pakistan inherited obviously were the British colonial systems, like the Indian Police Act, things like that. Okay. Some of those acts are no longer valid in United Kingdom, which originated them, but yet they continue in Pakistan, right? Some of these laws, some of these systems, some of these processes are still there in Pakistan in 2023, when the country that did it doesn't exist in England anymore. Why is that? Why have they carried on the legacy of colonialism?
That is the reason. The British, they made those laws. Yeah. The British knew why they made those laws.
Okay.
So they knew when not to follow those laws, when to reform those laws, when to change those laws. We never made those laws. So we never knew when to change them. We never knew anything about that. We just followed like slaves.
We just took it.
We're still doing.
Yeah.
You know what the main difference between a slave and a free man is? A free man can think for himself. Okay. A slave can't even think for himself. The slavery, the mindset, it's not about chains or whips. It's about the mind. If you're a slave in the mind, the master doesn't need a slave to a chain to enslave you. So that's the problem.
Could it be also that basically in the colonial days, the British were the master and the Indians were the slaves? When Pakistan, became an independent country, now the elite became the master and the masses became the slave. So this facilitates enslaving the general population and saying, keep them in their place.
I would use a different analogy. You are familiar with the term Uncle Tom.
Yeah.
So the Pakistani elite is like Uncle Tom.
Yeah.
The masters are the same. When Donald Lu speaks, governments fall.
Yeah.
It hasn't happened for the first time in Pakistan either. So the master is the same. The only difference is that and in those days of the British, the Uncle Toms were known as Sahab Bahadurs and Sir or Khan Sahab. And now they are known as prime ministers and ministers and generals.
There were plenty of Begums too.
Yeah, plenty of Begums too. Well, but Begums are mostly still known as Begums. But they are there. Yeah. So the names have changed, but the structure hasn't. And the Uncle Toms, they are wielding their stick over us. The house slave, who is in confident with the massa, and he tells the massa, who are the niggers, who are, I apologize for using that term, but please take it in context, that the Negroes, the slaves, he tells the master that the field slaves, which one are troublesome, and the massa tells him to eliminate those or to make those slaves' life hell. and the Uncle Tom does as the master bids.
So before I move
So
to the next question, one thing I don't understand. I don't understand why it's so difficult for people in Pakistan to understand that the CIA has been overthrowing governments since the 1950s. Plenty of governments they've overthrown. There's documented evidence. So there's no problem in believing that basically they can overthrow another government and they will keep on doing it. That's the way things operate.
well, they will keep on doing it until we realize it.
Yeah.
Until we realize that we are not free. You see, if a person he fails to, if a boy he has an exam due, but he fails to recognize that he has an exam due, he will not study.
He will not prepare for it.
He will not prepare for it. So first we have to believe our state of affairs. You know, there are a lot of lies fed in the Pakistani society, and most of those lies are invented by us and then eaten up by us. You see, there's a phrase by Wasif Ali Wasif. Now, I have great respect for Wasif Ali Wasif, but I really have come to hate that phrase. That phrase is, I'll tell it in Urdu. He said, Pakistan noor hai aur noor ko zawal nahi.
Oh,
Well, this just engenders such a complacent mindset. If God has to do everything, then why should I need to do anything? Because God is infinitely greater than me and he can do things much better than me. So why do I need to worry? I just need to get on with my life, right?
yeah.
So Pakistan Noor hai, Pakistan is something mystical, something
Noor.
mythical. No, it
Yeah.
isn't. It's a
Yeah.
state that was created to become an Islamic vanguard state. We have failed in that, and the failure of that project will, if it ultimately fails, it will result in a huge catastrophe for the
Catastrophe.
Muslims from Kabul to Dhaka. Just
Absolutely.
like the Spanish Muslims, they believe that the sun will never set on on Islam in Spain, but it did.
It
And the
has.
Palestinians, they did believe that we are the guardians of Baitul Muqaddas, Harm al-Sharif, and how come the Jew, he can dispossess us? No, he can't. And these lies, these push us into complacency, and we eat them up. So it's our fault. And they say the Uncle Toms invent these lies. Whoever invents these lies, whoever eats up those lies in order to support his indolence or her indolence,
Yeah.
I think he's the main culprit here.
He's
If
he
I am
that's
doing that, then I am the main culprit here.
yeah,
But that is a problem that Pakistanis have been facing, and Pakistanis are forced to have refused to wake up even after huge disasters that have befallen this country, like the brutal vivisection of the country, and now we are seeing a lot of economic turmoil, and a lot of times this Islamic State has been forced to go against everything that is Islamic.
that is Islamic.
Even now the transgender agenda is being pushed here,
Yeah.
and we do not have the gall to stand up and say enough is enough. This is our country, and we are going to run it according to our ideology.
Yeah. And
no, sir, we just leave these things to God.
yeah. And that's so let's move to the next phase. And in it, we will discuss the first war of Pakistan. So the next 10 years, 1957 to 67. So let's discuss the errors. And the major event, obviously, during those days is the first war with India of 1965. So what were the mistakes, in your opinion, critical mistakes, and how can they be remedied today?
Now, another critical mistake that was in the first 10 years as well, but came to acquire great importance, much greater importance in the second decade, the Ayub Khan decade. Sorry, I have a cold. That was the flagrant disregard for the rule of law.
Okay.
What Ayub Khan did was that he, in collusion with Sikandar Mirza, destroyed the constitution and agreed upon constitution, a legal constitution, not an Islamic one, not an ideological one created by the same elite. But what rule of law does is that law does evolve if you follow it. And forces outside the system, just like elite capture is evident in the system.
Yeah.
But if the system follows a law, then the people outside that have a chance to play by the rules and get in, compete with the elite, and then even kick them out according to the law.
Okay.
That's how democracy works. That's how any state works. You have to have a rule of law. You have to declare that this is the law, everybody's going to follow it. But when you say this is the law, everybody's going to follow it, but I am not going to follow it, then what does it lead to? It leads to despondency among a segment of the population, and it leads to rebellion.
Okay.
And that is what actually happened. In West Pakistan, it led to an apathy among large portions of the population that, oh, the government is done by so and so Malik Saab and General Saab, and he will keep on doing that. And in East Pakistan, they said that even these faces, these elite faces, they are not ours. They are all Punjabis, they're all Pathans. So what we have to do with them, and they don't let us play by their system as well. So what we need to do is then to divorce them. So basically, what Ayub Khan did was he destroyed a constitution, and then he said, "This was not a good constitution. I'll make a good constitution." Okay. Then he gathered some experts, and they gave him a report about the constitution. He said, "No, I do not agree with this report." He made many changes in that report, and then in 1962, he made a constitution that was tailor made by himself.
Okay.
So he himself decided the rules. That was in itself a thing that conflict of interest and such that you are in power and you are making the rules. But okay, you made the rules, but then he didn't even to bother to follow his own rules.
Follow his own rules.
Every hoodwinkery, every blatant disregard of the same constitution was done during the 1960s.
Okay.
In the 1965 election is an example. In 1967, when Ayub Khan was bedridden due to illness, the government should have fallen to the Bengali speaker, but nobody asked him, "Who are you?" even, and they didn't even let him near the corridor of power. And Yahya Khan actually governed the country as regent till the army chief, till Ayub Khan got better. So, and lots of other examples in economic and other fields as well. So you made a rule and then you don't even follow it. And you made it actually on the point of a gun in the first place. So now what message you are giving everyone who does not agree with you is that I cannot be reasoned with, I cannot be negotiated with, I only understand the language of force and gun.
Okay.
So that meant rebellion, and that was the seed of the rebellion in East Pakistan. Then there were other things. Ayub Khan actually did do some good things as well. But the thing is that as a dictator, again, he was in the position which Quaid-e-Azam was in 1947. Quaid-e-Azam wasn't a dictator, but he had immense popularity due to his role in the Pakistan movement. But Ayub Khan gained the same amount of power by different means. But nevertheless, he
through the
gained the
barrel of
same
a gun.
instrument. He gained the same instrument that the Qaid had.
Okay.
And now he could decide that, okay, I'm going to make what Pakistan hasn't been made. But instead, he went off on a whole other trajectory, and he actually tried to make Pakistan a truly capitalist economy and a secularized state that gave mostly lip service to Islam. So what that did was that it actually weakened the bond of Islamic ideology among the Pakistanis. If you take Islam out of the equation, actually, why should a Bengali and a Punjabi live in the same state was the question that was asked.
There's nothing in common apart from Islam between the two.
Well, there could be, but there is 1,000 kilometers distance between them, and there are other factors that matter. And then the Bengali could say that, why should I fight for the Kashmiri and endanger myself for the Kashmiri?
Correct.
If it weren't for Islam, then why should a
Yes.
Bengali die for the Kashmiri? So,
Yes.
or why should he care if the rivers of Pakistan are endangered by Kashmir, or if Kashmiri Muslims are butchered? If you
Yes.
are saying that you are a nationalist, and he say, okay, I'm a Bengali nationalist, and then why do you call him a traitor after telling him the same thing yourself?
Yeah.
So these things, they were never realized by Ayub Khan because he wasn't an intellectual. He wasn't a man who I would call very well learned, especially related to Islam and history. And what Ayub Khan did create was a cheap replica of the United States of America, but he failed to understand how United States of America achieved that significant success, that marvelous success that it had during the last 200 years. To be honest, the United States of America never did to its constitution what Ayub Khan did, even
Yes.
in the brutal civil war. So he just was in a utopia, typical state of mind, very common, unfortunately, among the high command of the Pakistan army, that they would just wave a stick and things would start going well, and all the politicians are corrupt and we know what's best for everybody. And these symptoms were exhibited by Ayub Khan as well. And then the impact this generated was that Ayub Khan actually did show a lot of economic growth in his period, but it all went away as soon as he went in a hail of protest.
Yes.
But even now, in Pakistan, you could talk to an army man and he would say, oh, look, Ayub Khan, he was the best Pakistan had ever had. Look at the GDP growth during that time, etc., etc. And they still have failed to learn the lesson from Ayub Khan that you do not destroy the rules that you yourself create, because if you do that, there will be only chaos and rebellion and people will hate you. And then you can play it like a mob wife and weep and say that why do people hate us? We work for them. We did this and we did that. But actually, if they look a little bit deeper, then I would say that Ayub Khan actually hit the basis of the Pakistani state with an axe quite a
Yes.
multiple times.
One thing
And
I want to
econo-
interject with you, three specific points in Pakistan history. If you look at the economy of Pakistan, where the GDP got better, right? If you look at data, it's Ayub Khan, Ziaul Haq, and Musharraf. And all
Yes.
three coincide with massive US aid and influx into Pakistan.
and
That's the
all
reason.
three ended
Yeah.
the same way as well.
And yes, as soon as they went, the economy just collapsed because
Yes.
the artificial, aid and dollars which are being pumped into it
Yes.
got stopped. Not because of any
Artificial
structural
dollars
change.
were stopped, and also the things they did when they were in power,
Yes.
the flagrant disregard of the rules that actually led to a lot of resentment and political backlash from the populace.
Yes.
So whenever they went, there was huge political instability, and whenever they did, they legitimized people who had done their best to destroy Pakistan before they came.
Yes. Yes.
What Ayub left for Pakistan was Mujibur Rahman.
Yes.
What Zia left for Pakistan was the likes of Bhuttos and Sharifs.
Sharifs
What
is still
Musharraf
there.
left for Pakistan were Bhuttos and Sharifs.
Bhuttos
Even
and
now, after the latest military intervention, we have seen literally the worst government that Pakistan had seen in its entire history of West Pakistan, I would say, probably.
Okay.
In the 16 months, the level of incompetence, that is, I'm saying, not the amount of damage they did. Thankfully, they were so incompetent that they couldn't even get deeper
Couldn't even.
enough.
So, Dr. Here we'll take a short break, and we will join you shortly. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back, Dr. Hassaan. So here we talked about Ayub Khan, we talked about his economic policies and impetus and reasons. One thing I want to touch on is the 1965 war, the first war between India and Pakistan. So what's your perspective on the war? What led to it? What was the impact? And what is happening today because of that first confrontation between India and Pakistan? First official confrontation.
Yeah, basically, the 1965 war, it was actually, people say Pakistan lost it. They say Pakistan won it. They say Pakistan started it. They say India started it. Now, if we take an objective perspective, actually, the 1965 war was born out of Indian refusal to even seriously negotiate about the Kashmir issue. The Indians, they had promised a plebiscite. Nehru himself had promised a plebiscite about a dozen of times, but then they refused because it was never their intention to hold a plebiscite. They just wanted to fool the global opinion. So in the 1960s, the Indian economy, it was a bit stagnant economy. And in 1962, the Indian army got beaten by the Chinese army, when before the war, it had been expected that the Chinese communists, who didn't have any Western support, would be beaten by the Indian army that was the direct descendant of the mighty British India Army. But contrary to expectation, the Indian army got a beating of a lifetime in 1962. And then in 1965, in a small skirmish in the Run of Kutch, kind of like the Kargil conflict, a limited small conflict in the south of Pakistan, West Pakistan, Pakistan actually gave India a beating again. So that skirmish actually pointed at the skirmish, and then there was the Pakistani confidence. It was the height of the Ayub era. The economy was going smoothly. Pak-US relations were running well. Pakistan also had an ally in China. So it actually led some military men and the foreign minister Zulfikar Ali Bhutto to believe that India would never compromise on Kashmir, and the only way to solve the Kashmir issue was to defeat India in a war and then force them to make
the
a
table.
settlement on Kashmir.
Okay.
And that was actually the thing that caused the 1965 war. Now, the 1965 war, it can be called a comedy of errors by both sides. First, we launched the Operation Gibraltar. It was not a very well-planned campaign. It was actually a very shambolic campaign. But despite Pakistan's dismal performance, what Gibraltar did was that actually the plan was that Gibraltar would make India insecure about their rear in Kashmir. And India will send some forces away from the border in the interior of Kashmir, and then Pakistan could launch an attack in the border areas in the Jammu region and cut off Indian supply routes between Kashmir and India to an extent.
That sounds like
region.
a lot like Kargil. Many decades.
Yeah,
ago.
but so the logic is not bad, but Gibraltar was so ill planned that it couldn't be hoped that India would draw back their forces.
Yeah.
But the Indians, they got so insecure after Gibraltar, despite its failure, that they did pull back forces. And they did weaken the crucial Akhnor sector. And that is when Pakistan struck. And for a moment, it looked like that Pakistan would achieve a military victory on about 1st or 2nd September 1965. But then again, the Pakistani High Command got cold feet, and at the last moment, the attack was stalled by the Pakistani side, not by the Indians, and the Indians got a reprieve. And after that, the war was more or less like a slugging match.
Yeah.
The Indians launched two offensives that failed badly because their army was actually a poorer version of the British India army, and they the offense is a lot more demanding than defense.
Yes.
And the Pakistani offenses also similarly failed, and the war ended into a stalemate.
Okay.
But the thing about the war is that its long-term importance was that first it generated a feeling in East Pakistan that we have been abandoned. Pakistan didn't have a lot of forces in East Pakistan. The theory went that in the case of war, West Pakistan will launch furious offenses on India, put India on the back foot on the Western Front, and India wouldn't even get a respite to think about attacking East Pakistan. That was the theory. And that was conclusively disproven in the 1965 war when it was seen that the Western Front became a stalemate. There were no furious Pakistani offensives.
Victories.
And had India remained on the defensive in the West instead of launching offensives there and focusing on the East, which actually they did in 1971, then they could win. And the theory was disproved, but the Pakistan army failed to accept that the theory had been disproved. One can say that they didn't accept it because some of them were malevolent. They didn't want to share the defense establishment with the Bengalis.
Okay.
And you can say that they were fools or egoistic people who didn't like to believe that they could ever be wrong. Whatever the reason, the strategy that was clearly proven a failure in the 1965 war was not abandoned. And actually in 1971, the same thing was repeated, that we will defend East Pakistan from West Pakistan. And we all know how that ended out. And then if we talk about some more things regarding to the 1965 war, it gives a great insight into the Pakistani state and military. The people, they were ready. There was much fervor in both West and East Pakistan to defend the country.
Yes.
But the army had no plan and even no vision about fighting a people's war.
Okay.
You see, India was 4 times larger than Pakistan then. Now it's 7 times larger.
7 times larger.
But to fight such a large adversary, you cannot fight it toe to toe, especially with a much weaker economy.
Yes.
So what you have to do is you have to do something that the opponent can't. But that is something that the Pakistan army refused to learn in 1965. They have refused to learn it now.
Okay.
Without the complete gelling up of the people and the forces in the defense of the country, Pakistan cannot be defended in the long run. That is very much clear to me. But that is a fact that was ignored in 1965 as well. You are fighting a war with India, and you have no plan how to encourage the people to participate productively in that, how to use the fervor that the people are displaying all over Pakistan. The Bengalis, the Punjabis, the Pathans, everybody was saying that, okay, I'm ready to do whatever I must for the country. But the army, which was both in the government and leading the war effort as a professional military force, had no planning or even no vision to inculcate uh, that mass of people into its defense. And this shows something that lacks in our mindset. It's the same mentality that the colonial army was always divorced from the people in matters of defense,
in
and
reality,
it kept the matters of defense away from the native people.
yeah.
And that is what has been done in Pakistan as well. Now, in India, the army is the same, but the army doesn't call the shots. The
Yes.
army has never governed the country. So the army follows what the civilian leadership orders, and the civilian leadership is actually much in sync with the people. But even the Indians, despite the fact that they are a much larger country than Pakistan, they bring out these schemes like the Agnipath. They at least try to bring more people into the defense of the country.
In the defense of it.
And Pakistanis don't do that.
So to summarize what you're saying, and I kind of agree with that as a military man, is looking at simply looking at the numbers and resources. The conventional strategy to defend Pakistan cannot work. There has to be some unconventional strategy, whatever that may be.
Yes,
and the military has
yes.
turned away from that. And it failed in
Yes.
65 and it failed in 71 and still, yeah.
And yes, now is the question, why does the military turn away from that? And
Yeah.
that is when we go into the slave mindset.
Okay.
You see, the military, like our elite, is much enthralled to the West. And they only follow what the West has prescribed.
Yeah.
And worse still, they don't follow what the West itself follows.
Yeah.
They follow what the West told us to follow when we
Prescribes
were
it.
their direct slaves.
That
They
was
told us-
my original question to you, that the British does not follow these rules. So what they're following
Yeah.
is what the West tells them, not what the West
Yes,
is actually doing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That is it.
Good. Let's move to the last question. So we want to cover the era from 1967 to 71 with the events leading to East Pakistan. We don't want to discuss Bangladesh yet. We will probably do that at a future date. So just to give people perspective, we've talked about East and West Pakistan. So Pakistan was actually two parts. East Pakistan, which is today Bangladesh, right? So what were the events that led to that catastrophic separation of the country, division of the country? What were the major blunders and what were the impact of that? Can some of those means and errors be remedied today?
Unfortunately, I don't know about a remedy, but I am seeing with my own eyes a lot of that being repeated, unfortunately. Now, when we talk about Bangladesh, the formation of Bangladesh, you see, in 1950, Pakistan Army was by far the most popular institution in East Pakistan. Despite the fact that in the army, there were less than 5% Bengalis.
Okay.
They didn't have their men in the army, but they loved it because they thought that the army would keep us safe. And come back 20 years later, and a person in a uniform couldn't go to the bazaar in Dhaka for
Yes.
fear of being lynched. That is before the election
Yes.
that precipitated the event. So how did this happen? See, and then there is another thing. The Pakistani ideology, the Islamic ideology, that lost its credence in Bengal, and there were some local factors in that, and there were some national factors in that. The local factors, now I might be called, I might be even abused by some Bengali brothers for saying this, but unfortunately, I think it is true that the Bengali cultural renaissance that was witnessed in the 18th, 19th centuries, that was almost entirely a Hindu phenomena. You see, it was led by people like Tagore and Bankrim Chatraji, who didn't, or whose anti-Islamic statements are well on record.
This is let me just this is a well-known fact, okay, that basically most of the arts and cultural heroes and icons of Bengal, even before Pakistan, right, and even today, right, were not Muslims.
Yeah, and therein lies the problem now. What Pakistani state had to do was to create a culture, create an Islamic Bengali renaissance in East Pakistan. That was the responsibility. But our Western and Eastern Pakistani elite made sure that nothing came out of it. that this project wasn't even seriously attempted. So
Okay.
that was a huge fault line. Now we see it even today. Uh, if you meet young kids in Pakistan, they know little about their own religion, about their own history. What they know a lot about is the culture of Hollywood
Yeah.
via movies and Netflix. And then you go a strand lower, if you go a strand lower, an economics and status wise strand lower, you come from upper middle class to the lower middle classes, then you see that most of the people, they also say that they follow the Islamic culture, but if you actually dissect those practices, a lot of them have nothing to do with Islam, because that ideology has never been translated into a cultural renaissance in Pakistan. That is absolutely essential if Pakistan is ever to become united as a state. That was essential before 1971. That is essential today. And that is the process that was ignored. And that was a huge reason for the separation of East Pakistan. Then there were other reasons. The, there was much was said about the economic disparity between the two wings. Actually, that was an issue that has never been understood in an objective light, or if it has been ignored by many. You see, East Pakistan did actually very well economically. If you compare it with 1947, in 1947, East Bengal was just the hinterland of Calcutta. But in the 1960s, during the Ayub Khan's reign, a lot of industrialization did take place, and East Pakistan was actually almost about to match West Pakistan in manufacturing when the manufacturing sector was practically nil in 1947.
Okay.
But the thing was that the Ayub government's policies ensured two things. On the political level, it ensured that most of the people, especially Bengalis, would be alienated. And on the economic level, it only benefited a select class which had links with the government. So all the industrialists and the rich farmers who benefited, actually the benefits didn't trickle down to the mass of the people, both in West Pakistan and in East Pakistan. But in East Pakistan, there was a spirit of rebellion because the army had been leading the country for 11 years. They had no stake in the army. There were few East Pakistanis in the army. And then there were also the cultural factors, the differences that led East Pakistanis to prefer Bengali nationalism over Pakistani nationalism, a case that was not apparent in West Pakistan. So that led to the movement of secession in East Pakistan. And even Ayub Khan in his diary has written that East Pakistan is bound to secede. And he mentions in his diary that we should do something to make the separation peaceful.
Yeah.
Even Ayub Khan knew by the end of the 60s that East Pakistan couldn't stay with Pakistan because the process of integration, political, cultural, and economic, had failed. Actually, Miss Ronak Jahan, belonging to former East Pakistan, Bangladesh, had written a book, Pakistan Failure in National Integration. That book was written 1 year before the actual separation of East Pakistan. It's actually a good book. And she has acknowledged Ayub's economic growth and all such and such. But the thesis, the conclusion that she had come to is the same, that the Ayub government failed to integrate East Pakistan into the Pakistani state project. And that was the root cause of the separation of East Pakistan. Now, a lot of specific events did occur, and we can discuss them, and inshallah, maybe we will discuss them. But if we are talking about general points, the main point is this, that due to the failure of implementation of the Islamic ideology, the state was bereft of a unifying ideological and cultural force. And due to the capitalist economy followed by Ayub Khan, the mass of the people was cut off from the economy. Now, I agree if anybody would say that, okay, capitalism didn't get its full run. If it had been, if the process had gone on for 30, 40, 50 years uninterruptedly, due to the trickle down, the benefits would have come to the common man in both East and West Pakistan. But the thing that Ayub, the third thing he did was the political straitjacket that he built ensured that his system wouldn't survive for more than 10 to
Wouldn't
15 years, because it had, even if it hadn't collapsed in a popular protest, it would surely have collapsed with the Ayub Khan's death.
I have a question here. So in the last 15 years, I've had extensive contacts with people from Bangladesh, for various generations, young, old, even those people who were born, when Bangladesh, East Pakistan was part of Pakistan. One thing I noticed, this is across Middle East, Africa, Europe, America, through different 4 continents, I've worked with people of Bangladesh, right? And when I see them, my only link to them today is Islam. Okay, there's nothing common. I don't speak their language. They don't speak my language. I don't eat the kind of food they do. They don't eat the kind of food I do. They don't dress like me. I don't dress like them. The only link is Islam. So I wasn't alive when the war happened or the separation happened, but in my mind, the only link that binds me to the people is Islam, right? So surely that should be the only link that should have been strengthened to keep the union together. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I agree with that. And that was the Achilles heel. We actually abandoned it very early. It took 2 decades for the result to come in. But the
Yeah.
mistake had been made before and was repeated again and again with every successive government. You see, even in East Pakistan, the people who remained loyal to Pakistan despite all
Yeah.
in 1971, they were all of them, without any exception, they were all who can be termed Islamists.
Jamaat Islami played a very
Jamaat Islami played a very
big part
important
in it.
role. They
Yeah.
are even being hanged by Hassaan Bokhari in Bangladesh today. And now, and there's another thing. What I have seen from my interactions with the Bengalis on social media, I have met few of them. I have spent very few days outside Pakistan in my life. The thing is that what I have observed is that 10% of the population of Bangladesh is Hindu. And the Bangladeshi Hindus actually exhibit more love for India than their own country, Bangladesh.
That's true.
And they are very vocal and rabid in their hatred of Pakistan, despite the fact that Pakistan is very far away from Bangladesh right now.
We
doesn't
have
influence Bangladesh at all.
We don't influence Bangladesh in any way.
We can't.
Yeah.
We're too far away. But still, the hatred is very real among the
Yes.
Hindus.
Yeah.
Pakistan has never done anything to them, but they hate it even more than a lot of Indians, for instance, South Indians. But the 90% Muslims, most of them clearly prefer Pakistan over India, despite all the propaganda and stories about 3 million killed and 400,000 women raped and etc. and etc. These are all myths. Actually, there were atrocities committed by West Pakistanis, of course, and there were atrocities committed by Bengalis as well. But these figures, they are whimsical. But these figures are taught as gospel in Bangladeshi textbooks.
Yes.
Even today.
Yes.
Despite this, and if you teach in textbooks, you can assume that most of the population accepts these as facts. Despite this, they prefer Pakistan over India just because of Islam.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
The thing is that as soon as Pakistan went away, the Bangladeshi Muslim, he went back. If you talk to a lot of Bangladeshi Muslims in 1969 or 70, they would say, what Islam? They just used Islam. They enslaved us. The Punjabis enslaved us. But if you talk to them 20 years later or even today, they wouldn't be so flippant about Islam.
No.
Because now they own it. Now they have their own state. And that is why autonomy for East Pakistan was essential during the Pakistan era. This process would have happened without any bloodshed. And the Bengali Muslims, they have shown that they can take care of themselves and they can take care of Islam at least as well as their West Pakistani counterparts.
Yes.
So that is another thing that we need to understand, that the system is always has to give ownership to the people. An Islamic system, if you say you're building an Islamic system, you have to give ownership to Muslims. And then the system will strengthen. Then the talent pool will widen. Then you'll gain valuable human resource.
And allow
that
the people to grow and mature themselves.
Yes, that is what the Pakistani state never even attempted and has never even attempted even now.
It's not attempting it today. Yeah.
It's not even attempting it today. So if some people are trying to do it, they are doing it on their own. Yeah. And the state is actually hindering them.
Yeah. Appreciate your time, Dr. Saab. So next time we'll end it here. Next time we will actually talk about the events leading up to the 1971 war and the separation of Bangladesh. And I want to ask you some pinpointed questions which many brothers and sisters from Bangladesh in the West Africa, Middle East, wherever I've encountered, they asked about the atrocities and things like that. So we'll discuss that in the next episode.
Yes, yes.
Appreciate
And
your
I
time.
would also request here that obviously you live in the United States and you have links with Bangladeshis as well, a lot of them, I guess. So if you could ask around in your circle of acquaintances what questions they want, what questions they have, and then we can answer those questions specifically as well.
I will. I will also bring in a specific story from a very good friend of mine and his auntie. She told me this herself. Okay, so I'll recount that to you. That she was a young girl in 1970s, and what she told me happened in East Pakistan. Also, as you know, my father was stationed in 1970 in Bangladesh. Okay, my family served in the military, so many things I've heard. So yes, we will dig into this in the next episode. Appreciate your time, Dr. Saab, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much. Wa alaikum assalam.